Go. Hi, everyone, and welcome aboard to KMGN to our course speaking and discussing the issues starting from strategy through change management to impact all the way. Now, we all know that leadership is something that without it, we are nothing. We cannot change, we cannot lead, we cannot move to place to place from place to place. We can dream, but it's worthless. So Vincent, my teammate here, thought that would be a wonderful idea to invite Karuna Ramathan from Singapore and Malaysia to speak with us. So Vincent, please be the host and introduce Karuna, please.
Okay, sure. Thank you, Moria. Hello, everyone. Well, it's when we developed the course with Moria and Rodolphe, and this leadership topic came out. I say, oh, I know one of the best speaker on the topic and the more entertaining one. And so I reach out directly to my old friend Karuna. So with Karuna, we know each other for a long, long time. He was one of the co-founder of the KM Global Network. So more than 10 years ago, so there was four countries. Singapore was represented by Karuna, and then we have Dr. Eric Su from Hong Kong, and also David Williams from Australia, and myself from Thailand. So Karuna was at the time the president of the Singapore KM society. So he's a KMer. So he fits very well into our course. And before that, Karuna was a Navy commanding officer for the Singapore Navy for more than 30 years, I believe. So that's where I guess he got a chance to develop his leadership skills. And since he retired for the military, he has been strongly involved in helping, I guess, new generations or even older generation like us to develop some change skills. And I believe he will talk to us about this today. So he has been with his creating change leader type of organization, helping to see how we can develop some of the skills that we will need, that we already need, but that we will need even much more in the future. And as you will see, these skills are fit very well with also the KM skill. Anyway, I don't want to say much more. Thank you again, my dear friend Karuna, for being with us today, and the screen is all yours.
Oh, thank you, Vincent. Thank you, Maria. It's an immense pleasure to join our friends back again, my friends back again, and the community. And I jump at every opportunity these days to be invited back. And so thank you for this. I think the topic of leadership has been largely an academic one for a long time. And then it has also been a consulting one for a long time as well. And so there's a lot of opinion on it, but it's always been fascinating to have to be able to draw very strong parallels to the knowledge management work that we all hold so dearly and we believe is important. And so that's really my objective today. And so when I had this opportunity, I said leadership is a strategic capability for KM. It is now more than ever. And I know that the community has been looking at AI, and so it's almost impossible, at least in the work we do today and yesterday, to not see the role that leadership plays. In fact, it's a pivotal role. We knew that KM doesn't exist without leadership. Now we'll tell you AI doesn't exist without KM, and KM doesn't exist without leadership. So therefore, leadership is strategic. So that's the sum of it all. There is no one size fits all, which is where the problem is. And I will share my couple of slides. So here's what I propose. If you will allow me, I propose we do this. Let's take the first 20 minutes or so to talk about some top line topics and all that before we get into the breakout rooms and examine what might be good practices, encouraging practices, and not so great practices that we see out there that might inhibit the KM work in terms of leadership. And then we'll come back and do, as I understand it, some presentations and some quick shares. I'll also be looking at the chat group to actually pick out some questions. And then we'll have towards the end a couple of levers as to what organizations can probably do based on our experience. And that actually can give us some insights as well as to what if you have to go back and tell your boss, hey, you know what, I listened to a KMGN talk yesterday and I picked up this one or two ideas that might help us very quickly.
Bom
And
dia, pessoal.
I'll some time at the end for some questions.
Tudo
Is that okay?
bem?
As
Obrigada.
a, as a, as a,
I'll
Tudo
mute
bem.
everyone. Just a minute.
yeah.
Please unmute yourself a minute after. Just 1 minute, please. Here we go. Please unmute yourself.
All right, here we go. We're all good. Thank you. So the starting baseline for us before we even get into any kind of KM is to be able to basically understand the difference between explicit and tacit knowledge. I must warn everyone here that I successfully defended a PhD topic on this intuitive tacit knowledge transfer about 12 years ago. So it will give me immense pleasure and struggle over 8 years to figure a little bit of it out, and I'm still not quite done there yet. So intuitive tacit knowledge is a huge part of my life, especially with the AI change work we do now these days. But we know that explicit knowledge is standard stuff for us for more than 3 decades. The tacit knowledge is hugely debatable and almost polarized. In fact, I think there was a LinkedIn post today with someone saying it should not be tacit knowledge, it's implicit knowledge, for example. So the term that we use is intuitive tacit knowledge. It kind of bundles out of that's what we did a couple of years ago. We said that there's some part of our tacit knowledge that becomes recallable when it is triggered by incident or it's triggered by situation or is triggered provocatively somehow. So we've all sat in a room and then we suddenly say, hang on, wait a minute, 6 years ago we did that and I was there and this was what I learned and I don't think we should forget. That's intuitive tacit knowledge. Whereas the large recesses of it, the 90% of it is probably not really easily retrievable and neither should one try. So I think that's the talk on the tacit knowledge. We can come back to questions on that. So first, there's explicit and tacit knowledge. The next part of this is a position that we have taken. We are now seeing a KM to AI shift, and I think last year it was still arguable, but this year it is pretty fundamental. And this suggests that yesterday KM was about getting our act together, our repositories right, our knowledge put together. And of course, there was the softer aspects of it, largely as was in the Kimpact Forum, lessons learned, how do you bring that to life? How do you build conversations, communities of practice, and all that stuff still good. Today, the adoption challenges knowledge systems, processes, protocols, and practices. What it simply means is if the KM architecture is not strong, it is probably shaky on some areas, it's unlikely that AI adoption is going to be successful. And I think a couple of months ago, we were still arguing about this, but these days, we're actually starting to see a lot of people admit that. And it's a reasonable statement to make. But then again, let's get ready for tomorrow. And here we go. And this is where the leadership part starts to slink in really nicely because tomorrow we need to activate people. Now, who are these people? Are they the entire workforce? Are they the leaders? Are they the managers? Are they the middle managers? We'll talk a bit about that, but really we are looking at a renaissance. We are looking at intelligence renaissance. We used to know the term data and infrastructure. We're now getting intel structure, which means to a 62-year-old, whatever is being presented is very accelerated intelligence state. Very high levels of intelligence, which on our own, it would have taken us days, maybe weeks to pull together. And that's for a 62-year-old, but is that worthy of a decision based on what's being presented? Well, let's hold that thought because there are enough experienced colleagues in the room who will tell you, hang on, wait a minute. Hang on, wait a minute. But the worry we have is to a 26-year-old that might inadvertently actually automatically represent enough knowledge to make decisions. So our challenge is to be able to translate intelligence into action, increasingly in AI-enabled organizations. It could be solutions, platforms, they could actually be systems that actually carry with them some degree of AI. So the KM movement or the KM movement will necessarily shift from KM to AI, and we're going to see a new KM front. It's not a new AI front. It's a new KM front as the anchor is KM. And of course, the vendor oversell is there as it was 30 years ago with our systems and the IT systems that promised the world that you could remove the. I mean, some of us have been in this for the last 30, 40 years and 30 years, and we've always been that the technology can actually take over the people. That sounded very familiar in the 90s as well with decision support systems and expert systems and all that automation. But here we are with companies actually starting to study seriously investment in knowledge management type work again. And as reluctant as that sounds, it is actually to realize AI investment. And so the ROI in AI is tied to the strength of the KM without a doubt. And the quality of organizational knowledge is now the direct determinant or is becoming fast the determinant of AI value. I have a couple of slides that will suggest that the AI in itself is of very little value until it's brought into action in terms of decisions, which is where risk and judgment become a problem. And now the leadership has to awaken to the fact that if they don't step in, intervene quite deliberately, you're going to be not able to control a lot of what happens in various parts of the organ. I'll give you an example. We did a Arthur Shelley, many of you know him. He's a dear friend. So Arthur and I, we did a project with a leading organization in Singapore, who's actually very admired. And basically, the starting point for that was the ask from the organization was the ISO 30401. Can we do and can we start the transformation with a knowledge audit? And for all intent and purposes, that was actually specifically asked for, and we did that. And it was a very difficult exercise for a couple of months to pull out all the factors, and they were argued upon. And I think 30401 was pretty new, so to speak, in that because it just come out a year or two or three. And when we pulled 30401 together and we said, hey, so these are our findings from the factors and from the harder sides of it, the system sides of it, and getting into the culture part of it and all the processes part of it, there was complete adverse reaction, which means the organization then slipped into its functional defenses to say it's not mine, it's not your fault, it's my fault, it's your fault, it's our fault, so it's IT. Ultimately, it's IT's fault, and IT said everyone had a mindset issue. Now, what's the purpose of this story in terms of strategic leadership? And this is strategic leadership because when we went up to the C-suite, who actually was mandated responsible for knowledge work in the organization, so now we know it's a gentleman, he said, I'll wait until the leadership decides to do something about this. To which having been at this for years and sometimes say the wrong things in the wrong meetings, said, you are the leadership. And so that's really where we are with where this can get to until AI has come in, and now entire C-suites and boards are looking at justifying the AI investment. So for the KM practitioner, we now have an even larger problem. Strategic leadership is going to be uncomfortably important in bringing alive the KM movement, not because of KM in itself and by itself, but because of the AI investment and the promise and the pitfalls that it holds. So, and the vendors, change leader in Singapore and Malaysia, Southeast Asia, we are strategic change partners to Info, which is a very advanced ERP type system, competing with SAP and Oracle. And basically that amount of change that has to happen is quite fundamental. It's really high investment and it's high promise, and you really need to see strategic leadership start to play a role. I'm going to discuss what that is, and we're going to listen to some views on it as well. So there's a recent IMD study that actually holds some very interesting points. It's available on the internet, this pretty nice little report. We are seeing words like efficiency, productivity, the potential, and at the end of the day, the agenda for leaders right now is how to draw the extract the highest value of this, again, the investment. So AKM for KM's sake is still going to struggle in senior level discussions, but KM that propels, that fuels AI, especially in terms of language that business leaders are used to, how do you realize your return on investment to this wonderfully seductive solution that is about to transform how your organization does work and gain you lots and lots of profit? It comes down to something like that. And so the IMD report actually shows that one way to do this is to deal with the new levels, accelerated levels. And I said this, I coined this phrase, Intel structure. It's no more infrastructure. It is about how basically we are going to be able to deal with a lot of stuff presented to us and looking seductively like knowledge, and therefore the term adaptation. Adaptation brings immediately people into the adoption equation to say that you need to prepare people to be able to think, act, and feel differently about this overwhelming tsunami of data, information, in some cases, starting knowledge, to which we are going to have to be able to see things new, different, better, and faster. Now, therefore, is strategic leadership a a concern for the senior leaders, as it has been in management studies for the longest time in terms of academic definitions? Or is strategic leadership a strategic capability for the organization that begins to transcend or find its way dropping down from the C-suites into the functional leaders and even into the middle managers and the line? Which now means for the organization to have this as a strategic capability for everyone to see new, different, better, and faster. We might need to start thinking of how the middle core, where the action is and also the inaction tends to be, actually starts to do this a little better. And basically, the human adaptability comes into real issue. Now, we've heard, I'm sure in Singapore and everywhere else in the world, we're starting to hear these terms reskilling and upskilling. We see this as an upskilling issue. We believe we all have some of these skills, and it's been lying latent for a while. We are all leaders. We lead at home. And so, therefore, when we go to the organizations, we are capable of that leadership. We just need to be upskilled in the context of it. And basically, we need empowerment. So, the terms we use in our work daily from a practitioner is enabling and empowering. Enabling them for the upskills and empowering many people in the organization to be able to decide. And why decide? Because the practice is now becoming a constraint, even if the technology is a catalyst. And this is really where the AI KM paradox comes alive and brings to life strategic leadership capability. Now, the leadership as strategic would do three things, probably knowledge. This is KM 101. Where are the knowledge assets? Is it scattered? Is it something we all need to hold? And some of the work that's coming out in IP, I think, intangible assets by WIPO, I think is really, really quite fundamental to this shift that we are seeing, where intellectual property gives way to intangible assets, and some of these assets are actually huge knowledge assets for the company. So that is going to be very difficult in the change work that we do to actually share some of these as best practices, because these are actually the success factors within the organization. There's a little subtle tension there, because in Singapore we were asked a couple of weeks ago to submit a template on how we would do this and a description on how we were doing this for every company, and we said no way, because that would be a complete breach of privacy in terms of the assets. The second is shaping culture, and this is such a big and difficult frame. The culture of sharing, reuse, and psychological safety. In fact, the converse of it is psychological fear, and most of us do live at it at work, unfortunately, where we don't want to say anything for fear of upsetting people. You could call that safety. We call that fear. We call that, it's actually, there is safety in fear. And so when you roll around that a bit, you'll find that we have fixed ways of working, and that culture freezes over time. But ultimately, the challenge for leaders and leadership in terms of capabilities, how do you turn this equation into one of accountability, responsibility, and even culpability? Because a machine, at least from the work that we have done, we have never met an organization where a machine takes the decisions for you. It makes for you. It is just way too risky. We wouldn't allow that in our personal life, and we certainly would not allow that when we actually are in a position for accountability and responsibility. So we cannot rescind these decisions to machines. And there is a few things that strategic leadership would have to deal with, but fundamentally, it is the very nature of organizations. The way organizations are organized, most are for micro decisions at the point of action, which means the middle managers come into point. How do you, even if you had a generative AI solution or or an agent as part of a team, hypothetical team, the manager would still have to take responsibility for that decision at the point of action. That empowerment has long been overdue in most organizations. I'm going to say this because there's enough evidence of it coming out of Gartner, Gallup, and a whole lot of us out there that suggests that we do go to work generally upset, depressed, and slightly negative. It's just the way things have become. And now we need to do a redig of how we're going to reset the workplace for action point micro decisions with human agency being celebrated. Now, this in itself is a leadership capability act. And finally, the test of it would be judgment. And I made some statements. This is a picture, a lovely picture of us. I really appreciated this picture. It was taken up in the Impact Forum. And I said three things. And if I had to summarize three things, I would say AI adoption success is unlikely without organizational KM. We'd have to move the leadership discussion from the top into the middle, which now means every manager, leader, which for the longest point in time has been romanticized but not really value ridden because the roles expand and is enabled by AI. And the engagement, enablement, and empowering would bring alive another topic which in KM has been rather subdued, in my opinion, called personal KM. It now depends very much on how we cope, adapt, learn faster than others to see things new, different, better. Now, I've gone on. I've had a bit more before we can break into the rooms, if you'll allow me. I think that 30401 is a ready solution to working the space. And we have started to do that. We have actually dug deep into 30401. Well, for a start, we did that, Arthur and I, with the client, but that's when you really practice and dig it up, then you realize there are little gems in there that actually points us quite nicely. It does allow us to frame the KM as a formal management system and not just a tag. It aligns it with strategic decisions and viable business. It's all there in Trees Roving. It tells you what you should be doing. It even goes into the culture part and integration into processes, and basically lovely. It aligns leadership and commitment and focus of effort. Now, uh, before I leave this to the discussion, there are two terms that we use quite often in the work that we do in terms of strategic leadership capability and change leadership. Adoption, we believe that successful adoption is unlikely without KM being the anchor. So if we're going to study as we do with Info as our partner and companies in Malaysia and Singapore, we immediately start to examine how KM looks like in that organization and whether there's a certain confidence in the KM work that's gone on so far. And in most organizations, unfortunately, the feedback is not great. It could be a lot better, and we need to start to fix those before you invest in the AI or the AI hype, whether the foundations are strong enough. But the second is adaptation. And this is really where the bridge between leadership as a capability and leadership as action is in adaptation. Do you trust enough of your people as leaders to engage with them, to equip them with the skills to engage with them, to enable them in the upskills, and basically to empower them to build new, different, better, faster things in terms of the decisions. Uh, and of course, for us, personal KM becomes very big, as Vincent said. We do a lot of skills work. And so, how do you do this as a successful person or as a person who wants to be successful at work? You will have to learn faster. You would have to relearn how you learn, and you would have to pick up those adaptive team and knowledge habits. So we even coined a term called knowledge skills. And there are knowledge skills now that cannot be taught in schools, but can only be brought into practice and developed as ability in workplaces. And these are the learning issues that we see now: digital brains, personal habits, collective goals. A whole lot of that stuff is there. I'm sure some of it will come up in the conversations that we'll have. And before we get into the suggestions that we have, I have one more slide. Do consider that a strategic leadership capability is not a leadership per se at the C-suite. It is a organizational capability that would potentially be droppable into two very important cohorts. The first is where real work takes place, and this we call them the middle managers. Some of you recall McKinsey's great work on this a couple of years ago. Of course, McKinsey said why it's important and didn't tell us how. Yeah, but that's classic. But I think if the middle manager is, we think in our work, and we have real data to suggest this, if the middle manager is not engaged, enabled, empowered, it is going to be extremely difficult to actually get anything else going, not even KM. And the second is the new graduates. There's a growing bridge between what they're studying in higher institutions of education plus into how they get into the workplace, and we are going to have to accelerate those skills. I'm going to pause here. I think it's a good time to do breakout rooms, Moria, if you would, Vincent, Moria. Can't hear you.
Please, wonderful. Before we open the breakout rooms, please explain the teams what they are expected to do. They will have 10 minutes, 8 minutes. First of all, how long are we giving them?
I think 8 minutes is fine.
8 minutes is my preferred time always. Okay, now what are we expecting them to do in the room? Please explain before we send them out.
We have engaged with leadership in our organizations. We have engaged with leadership practices. So the question is just a very straightforward one. What are some leadership practices that support KM, could improve KM, or affect KM?
People, does anyone want to ask a clarification question before we open the rooms? Okay.
It's
So,
okay.
yes, please.
No, it's okay. So it's
Okay, so what I'll do first is I'm now sharing with you in our chat the well, I've lost the chat. I'm sharing with you in the chat the link to Miro, first of all, and now let's open the rooms. Eight minutes, please.
We don't have the link on the chat yet, Moria. I don't see it. Moria, did you share?
Question be on the Miro?
Look at the Zoom chat, please.
Yes, I'm looking at it, but I don't see
No,
it.
it is
I
not
agree.
there.
I
Yeah.
can't see the link. I
Yeah,
can
Oh,
see
I'm
put
sorry.
it
I'm
again.
sorry. I've sent it by mistake to one of the people, not to everyone. Now I'm
Thank you.
resending it.
It's
Okay, now
there.
it is there.
It's
Yes,
there.
yes, it's there.
Okay, great. Thank you, Moria.
Okay, thank you. Here we go. Karuna, I'd like to share a short story, 1 minute,
Sure, go
about
ahead.
affecting KM once everyone returns, because I think that the difference between affecting KM and supporting KM may be vague somehow. So I want to share a story. We didn't stop recording, so we are still recording. 25 years ago, and I still remember the story. We're sitting with a team in one of the rooms in a big industrial company with a marketing team, and we're explaining them, and it's 25 years ago, and we're explaining them what are our expectations when we are now going to build a lessons learned database. And the VP of marketing enters the room and she looks at us and she says, "Oh, KM, you're now bringing us a new technology. I hate new technologies." Okay. And she leaves the room. Now, two things happened. First, we decided to build our database using Excel so they don't have new technology. But the more important part, and this is the lesson from this story, is that we lost this project because we couldn't really make the change. So sometimes when we speak about leadership, before we give them big roles and important place, we have to explain the details so that they understand, so that they don't ruin for us. Because what they ruin with one sentence, it would take so long to fix, if fixable.
Thank you, Maria. I totally agree with you. We've all had these stories, and I think we can write a book on this, more than a book, a couple of books on this, as to how power and position dictates outcomes. And for the longest time in organizations, that has been the case. Now, here's the twist, and I'd like to put this out as an alternative view for some of us for us to be thinking about. The first is, for the longest time, the term KM has been really beaten up. It's been beaten up. It's been beaten up in management team meetings. It's been beaten up in boardrooms. It's been beaten up in C-suites. And I don't think there's any senior executive who's deeply excited about allowing a KM project to run for a couple of years so that we can reset the organization. But that's really where the paradox is right now. Uh, you're not going to be able to install any kind of significant AI energized system or solution or platform without those fundamentals. So in the slide earlier, I said the KM is the anchor. And now we have a problem because the very leaders are going to have to reluctantly stop, rethink, reallow, and bring that back into the play. And that's a strategic leadership capability. The ability to do that at that level is strategic capability, which means the organization repositions itself and recenters itself for the changes that it intends. So someone actually put out there on LinkedIn, this is not a AI adoption exercise, it's a change management exercise, and change management based on what? So that's the first. The second is there is change going through all of us, and we all need to build that strategic capability to be able to see down, see up, see side, see left, see far, learn fast, do things differently. And we cannot be absolved of anything other than let my boss decide, which is also weak leadership. And that has been personal KM's largest potential gain. How are we going to, irrespective of which generation we come from and the views we hold against AI and no AI and whatever the case might be, how do we purposefully become successful through our management of the knowledge so important to us. Now, two levels here. And I will say this, the first is problematic because you're now talking to very senior people in the company who have who have had to actually work in a way that's made them successful. And a lot of that tacit knowledge, at least in our research and our work over the years, has not been expressed up to now because of some leadership behaviors that we have seen. Just keep quiet and do as I tell you is quite a common refrain in many parts of the world. I want this done my way. Let's all not introduce anything new, as the example went. Yes, so you have that. So we're going to have to awaken that tacit base. And I'll assure you, I got asked in stage in India when I was doing a presentation to a partner event. Is there a difference between how a 50-year-old will make a decision and a 25-year-old make a decision? The answer is yes. The science and literature makes that abundantly clear. The issue is whether the 50-year-old is actually going to share the logic and the constructs of that decision. And we need to engage them to do that. Now, here's the 25-year-old. Let us not run
You're
away
not
with
sharing your screen.
that. So for the 25-year-old, we have another set of problems. How do you actually instill in this person who is so enthusiastic, as we all were at that age when we stepped into the workforce, that everything you see in AI is not the answer? It is actually the thinking that needs to happen, and those thinking skills do not manifest, unfortunately, in the schools. Much as we academics might try, real work skills are completely different. They are adaptive, they are team decisions, collaboration, the whole lot of stuff that happens. So we put together I put together a couple of levers. First, there are some very obvious things that we can do, mission critical as we did, and link it to ISO 30401, prune it, make sure that we are particularly sensitive. In the breakout room, we heard an idea of how to use KM AI for induction, make sure we're very clear about what's going into the LLM so that these little pilot projects can actually start to show up some useful first use cases. The second is to remember that it's not the platform, and this is what I say to all my ERP colleagues, it's not the platform that results in the sharing. It is the leadership behaviors. And this is where we meet a lot of problems in the work we do because we go in trying to bring AI and change alive, and then after a while it will be manifested in the senior leadership group putting ceilings up there for behaviors, and you start to hear stories as why the senior leader is behaving in this way. That's why we actively coach. Uh, the third thing to do is a very painful but necessary continuous integration activity. So sorry, it's not going to take 6 months or a year. There is adoption, adaptation. There's also a term called adaption, which is how you tune the platform or the system into the context of the organization's workflows. That's going to take a lot of trial and testing. And here again, it is a strategic leadership capability because when the middle managers start to own the problem, you have a wonderful, wonderful opportunity that they're all engaged and they're all seeing themselves as leaders. And KM, therefore, is not extra work, it is about active thinking. So we have a real opportunity to awaken KM in the context of AI. This one, who owns it? So governance is a leadership responsibility, but a strategic capability would be the acceptance of accountability, responsibility clearly, and to some extent, the determination of culpability, which is risk and governance in terms of. So in some areas like accounting and you find audits, you see that very clearly. In operations, it doesn't happen so clearly. It gets transferred all around the block. This is the fourth lever. The fifth, the transformation shifts we want to see are conversation. So I think, Martin, yes, the transformation shifts we want to see are conversations, orchestration, and of course, intelligence is a huge, huge open area for discussion because the misinformation risk is going to be very, very problematic for a lot of organizations. We've already seen some starting cases. Recall the Australian Deloitte case, I think, if I name them right, that you actually have consulting groups falling prey to this very quickly against client deadlines. And so I would be brave, and I'm going to say this to a client in 2 weeks' time. You need to do KM audits every year, just like you do audits every year. You need to do KM audits every year because you're going to have to get a sense really of where the gaps and the spaces are that you might have to reduce risk. It is a leadership capability to be able to do that when it's decentralized into the organization and not power being held at a top level. Uh, so I think this is my last slide. I think if we were going to talk about this back to our bosses, I think it would be very nice if I think I do have a half day coming up with a C-suite group in a manufacturing organization, and this would be the slide that I would use. Probably get it strategic. There is a 30401. What is mission critical to you? Is it governed already in terms of your knowledge sources? Are you sure? And hey, this psychological safety thing is not academic. It is real because in the absence of it, there is latent psychological fear, and that really affects trust. And then the terms that we use here for ease of understanding for senior leaders, equip them, AI literacy, engage them, make them part of your solutioning, enable them, upskill them because no two middle managers are the same, and empower them for decisions. And we also have a little pet project, PIEF, running that new graduates are starting to see a very difficult bridge in terms of how they bring their value across very quickly. So we are working on equipping them with knowledge skills. I think that's about all my sharing at this point. I think we do have a couple of minutes for some open questions.
So we have here some comments. Really clear. I love the idea. Okay, no questions. I think that if we have some time, you can walk through the mirror board and we can ask people from the different teams to share their learnings so we learn from them all.
Yeah, let's do that. We do have some time, I think about 12 minutes.
So I'll share in group number 1, we had Anahit, Stephanie, Torsten, and Tracy. If any one of you can share your learnings.
We talked a lot, so I will start. Maybe the others will continue that. So it's my experience that when we have autocratic style of management, it's very difficult to share knowledge and there is no trust, but vice versa, there is fear in the organization. And even one person can't change anything. For example, in our organization, our chairman is eager to share knowledge. We had last year every Friday knowledge hour and everyone would share. Now it doesn't exist because the other managers, they didn't want to share. And even our manager, she doesn't want we learn during working hours. So it's an autocratic, just knowledge autocratic style. But we spoke about participative style and charismatic style of management. Charismatic, it depends on the values of the organization, but participative is when they are an example of something, the managers, and so if they exemplify knowledge sharing, the others will continue.
Thank you
Excellent.
so much. Do you want to respond? Do you want to add, please, Karuna?
Yeah, I'll give you a quick example. When we do this work in organizations, we keep an eye out on the senior leadership group. And of course, we don't tell them we are watching them, but we gather data from the ground. And as consultants, we are able to feed that back either to an individual or to the group with the anonymity clause that actually we are going to have to do a little better. If not, we're going to not see the results. And I go back to the point and I hit that the issue is no longer about leadership, neither is it about KM. It is about the AI investments. These things don't come cheap. And in due course, when organizations decide to spend millions of dollars, as the projections are, something needs to change. We are actually saying that leadership methods need to change. So
Yes.
for all of us.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Moving to room number 2. In room number 2, we had, you were also there, we had Gunnar and Kieran and Martin. If any one of you want to share?
Rena, would you start or should I?
You can, Gunnar.
Okay. So we hadn't time to write anything down because we were discussing a lot. So I just said, what's the situation in my company? Because my government company, we're talking about implementing AI, and especially in the Department of Knowledge Management. And we are hoping that we can support by an AI assistant the current search engine system, in the meaning of using, for example, with new colleagues on like an onboarding tool, that they will find much quicker answers, that they don't have to wait maybe for, let's say, a slow response from by email or by any kind of seminar they're looking for it, but they get a much, much faster and quicker, hopefully reliable answer. And that we are hoping that this will improve the knowledge and understanding, especially when the middle management will support this, especially when they give the hint, they can use this and will see if the answers will be, let's say, reliable or correct. So these are our current approaches. And so this is why we hope it will have a major and positive effect on KM.
Yeah. Excellent. And we discussed this. And I think this is a very low-hanging, very good opportunity to demonstrate a use case and build a confidence around it, Gunnar. But I'm picking up a question, Moira, if you'll allow me to, in the chat right now. I'm curious, how do you talk about KM with senior leadership? Do you talk about KM or do you break it down into things they better understand, like highlight the risks associated with bad AI? I get asked this. I was asked this in Kimpac as well, Vincent will remember. And I said this to a small group. We never talk about KM. It is something that would draw blood immediately and doors will shut and you'll be off the table. But in the context of AI, we talk about needed change. And when we start to talk about needed change, the question becomes, how do we help the organization get to the state that it is in, to the state that it needs to be before they start to see the ROI on the KM promise or the AI promise. And this goes back to the levers that I suggested earlier on. You might want to slide the ISO 30401. You say, let's just look at our current knowledge systems as to whether we can actually reliably build this application or bring in this platform and bootstrap it. And that slides the KM part in. We don't talk about KM per se. We talk about change. And change, my good people, is in every leader's uncomfortable agenda these days. Last year, it might have been less, but this year, it is a forced acknowledgement that change needs to happen. The question is, do they pay for it? Do they want us to help them with it? Do they think they can do it on their own? Do they actually think that? And I think it's work coming out of Heifetz and Minsky from Harvard that said most leaders grossly overestimate their charisma. They grossly overestimate. It is actually a good it's a good book to read, The Leadership Pipeline. And it said you actually think that when you're put in charge, everyone's listening to you. The answer is they're just observing you and they're listening to what they've decided not to do. So that's really where this is. So to answer that question, we look out in terms of how we can start to build the conversation around change and needed change and the support for change, and the anchors for that change would inevitably be KM. So I'm just very grateful and blessed that I've had so many years working with it with colleagues, that I can build it into my leadership experience and my organizational development work that we do, and now organizational design. And I'll tell you, never a day has it been that KM was not relevant.
Wow. Should we continue?
Yeah,
Do
I think
people want to respond to to the question, please? How do you speak with management? I can start saying that if they don't use the term KM, I will never use it, as these two words don't work together. So I would speak about knowledge sharing. I would speak about other things, A. B, I try to speak about business impact and relating the word knowledge or documented knowledge to the business impact, and trying to speak as much as I can more with business words and less with knowledge words.
Yes. That always works. Their language.
Their language. We all like to hear our language.
Yes.
We all remember the doctors that speak above our heads.
So,
Well,
sorry,
yeah,
so
sorry.
Mariah, yeah, just quickly picking up on that one. I posed that question. In this case, how do you even get in the door? If you present yourself as a KM consultant, you sort of you really lost the battle.
I said this with the team in Bangkok. I said, never do that. Present yourself
Mhm.
as a change consultant relative to AI. That the worry that most CEOs have now, and I say this from first-hand experience, is not how much the system costs, but it is how is it going to be absorbed in my organization. So the default word for that is change. And like I said, the ISO is a very good structure, the 30401, because you do have a good set of standards to make an evaluation, and it's a diagnostic in itself. And you can actually start to say, hey, here's the data, this is what you might want to watch, because the vendors are falling hell over themselves in trying to tell you that everything is going to be so different for your company. But it's the so the term we use is absorption. The language is change language. And KM is the anchor. I hope that helped.
I think that it's easier not to approach CEOs, but to approach the C-suits and speak with them about their problems, their designated problems, because we like to solve pain points. And if you speak about with the operations about problems that have to do with efficiency and effectiveness, and when you speak with HR about people that are leaving with their knowledge, etc., etc. There is
Maria.
another question of
Yeah.
Edin about KM audit methods.
Yeah. Well, there are two ways. One is if it's a system-heavy organization, then the 30401 is quite interesting as it draws a lot of ideas. But the second is most organizations are simply based on diagnostics, change readiness, and there's a whole lot of there are models and tools out there that we use. We have our own proprietary fast assessment setup that we use as well. But these are some of these terms called audit don't sit very well with leaders as well. So because it puts them into defensive, so we just say let's do a readiness check. Let's do a dipstick into the engine. Let's not try to tear it all apart. So that's there's some very good organizational change readiness tools that you can use out there these days.
Last question, because we are running out of time, is there is a question to do with the confusion of management as to the difference between information management and knowledge management. How do you address it?
Well, again, what's top foremost on the minds of many C-suites these days is not KM, it's not information management. But you are right, absolutely. We face this all the time. But that intelligence that they're going to get their hands on, thanks to particularly generative AI and anything upwards of that, would suggest that they would need to understand that intelligence is seductive and it can masquerade as knowledge. And that's really where we'll have to put the guardrails and safeguards and the governances and all the other stop measures to be able to think. So I will leave you with this. A mentor had said this to me a couple of weeks ago at dinner. He said, and he's a very, very good academic. I said, how do you use AI? He said, well, I start with it and then I start thinking. And that comment has stayed with me throughout, which means do not think with it, start with it, and then think, because you're really, really going to have to think about the implications, consequences, and all the fallbacks and drawbacks and opportunities that intelligence provides you. And so we take the conversation away from information management and knowledge management and all this, I'm right, you're wrong, and all that, which actually doesn't serve much business purpose. I hope I've done justice to this hour. And you have really, really provoked me. It's 9 p.m. in Singapore. So I'm going to have some difficulty falling asleep because there's a couple of questions now ringing in my head and I'm going to have to write that down. But I do have a white paper on it. And if you drop me an email, I'll be more than happy to give you a couple of additional pages of how you might want to see this. I didn't just want to float it out there and throw it out there. So let me know if you're keen. It's Karuna. Please take that down. Karuna @ K. I will put it in the chat. Let me just quickly put that in the chat so that we So karuna@krk.sg. I'll certainly send you the paper, and you can ask me any other questions, and always happy to share.
Thank you so much. I'll be quick as we are after time. I learned, in 2 words, I learned. Thank you so much. Next week, we will have Hank Malik speaking about metrics for how to manage, how to measure the KM impact. So thank you, everyone, and applause to Dr. Karuna. And thank you again, Vincent, for bringing all these wonderful speakers. And that's the way that we work globally, everyone bringing in new people from new places. Thank you, bye all. See you next week.
Thank you, Karuna. Take care. Thank you all.
Thank
See you
you.
soon.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye.